Is Eren Jesus? And when does he become the Messiah? I know what you must be thinking. You must be thinking I just blurted out one of, if not the most absurd set of questions. But for anyone who's rare or watched Attack on Titan, it becomes very evident that Eren Yeager is encapsulated by the Messiah trope, a trope characterized by a person who rises from oppression, marked by destiny, prophecy, or something divine and supernatural. This person becomes the center for change for the problems affecting the people of that time, and eventually gains the following of sorts. They begin to treat him like a god, and later on becomes something greater than what he once was. All this while mirroring the Bible's Jesus Messiah prophecy. In media, we have characters like Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars, and more recently famous Paul Atreides from Dune, just to mention a few. I'm starting to see a pattern here with the sci-fi genre, but I digress. So back to the first question, is Eren Yeager Jesus? Yes, Eren is in fact a portrayal of this trope. I find it interesting how intertwined this trope and Eren have become with nihilism. The one stand by prophecy tends not to be the answer, and in Eren's case, this is true. And this will inevitably lead the character into conflict with determinism, which I find profoundly interesting with Eren, because you have this character working in a deterministic world chasing freedom, or at least he was chasing freedom but later on decides to align himself with his future self's actions, as opposed to fighting it, of course. And because he aligns with these actions, the birth of the chain of events that make him the Messiah take place. This is where the biblical Messiah and Eren share ties, whereby the Messiah becomes the least free person in the world, tied down to prophecy and determinism. This Messiah must bleed for their people. Their suffering is for the greater good, even when the majority are wrong. The majority being those who wanted the rumbling to take place, and in this case, the people of Paradise and the Yeagerists. And this want is born from the oppression of the people, including the Messiah himself, Eren. And in Isayama's own words, the story starts with the victim who then goes through the story and becomes an aggressor, whereas Jesus came from the oppressed, but then dies for them, without ever becoming the aggressor, his death marking a deep symbolism, whereas Eren's death wasn't. Well, not in the same way at least. His is more of a straightforward fight against morally absolute evil actions in war and highlighting its victims and bystanders. I must say I don't think Isayama set out to make Eren Yeager a messiah. I think it was unintentionally done. What makes Eren interesting though is that his depiction of the messiah trope is one of no redemption. Take Anakin on the other hand. He works in service of the dark side, but then abandons his role as Darth Vader, saving his son Luke. And I often see more parallels to Paul anyway. Paul as the Messiah is a cautionary tale of tragedy or determinism. Paul sees tragedy coming and tries to find a way out of his determined future, whereas Eren is in fact the tragedy of determinism, but doesn't try to look for a different path, a different way. But I pointed this out earlier. I'm just trying to show you where Eren and Paul intersect and diverge as characters, showing us the different depictions of the Messiah trope, because what kind of Messiah brings about the rumblings? It ultimately makes it evident that the Messiah trope is usually depicted in more of a dark and tragic manner. In fiction, writers including Isayama use it as a critique of the removal of responsibility and accountability from determinism and the human need for a savior, whereby people assign all moral agency to one person. So back to the whole association to this trope to nihilism. Why is it that this trope uses it as a backdrop or a driving force for it? Surely Isayama knew he was making Attack on Titan nihilistic. I couldn't find any interview with him talking about any specific religious foreshadowing or direct mentioning of nihilism, but the story is nihilistic, a message of humanity's institutional, generational evil, and this shares ties to Herbert's nihilism as well, as both stories are used to show or reveal a deeper problem and created meaning by people and their institutions, especially when a central figure is involved. And in our case, Eren Yeager. And this nihilism is very evident with the whole question of whether Eren was ever truly free, and in Isayama's own words. So the truth is, the situation with Eren actually overlaps in a certain sense with my own story with this manga. When I first started the series, I worried that I would have probably been cancelled, It was a work that no one knew about, but I had already started the story with the ending in mind, and the story ended up being read and watched by an incredible number of people, and it led to me being given huge power that I didn't quite feel comfortable with. It would have been nice if I could have changed the ending. Writing manga is supposed to be free, but if I was completely free, then I should have been able to change the ending. I could have changed it and said I wanted to go in a different direction, but the fact is that I was tied down to what I had originally envisioned when I was young, and so manga became a very restrictive art form for me, similar to how the massive powers that Eren acquired ended up restricting him. This suggests that this world isn't tied down to strict determinism. Eren ultimately was capable of changing his actions, so Eren's nihilistic world has hope. He's the Messiah who was given the chance to choose how to save his people. The Messiah born from life choices. In the biblical narrative, Jesus' path isn't something that emerges from his life choices the way Eren or Paul's does. It's fixed before he was even born, scripted across the Old Testament. And I know I just said Eren could have chosen how to save his people. Eren could have also chosen not to be the Messiah altogether. I find that interesting that this choice is something writers choose to allude to in their presentation of the Messiah trope. Like Eren, Anakin, and Paul. Each to different degrees, of course, because in Star Wars it's more evident that Anakin could have chosen a different path, whilst Dune and Attack on Titan is more complicated and not as straightforward because of the added layer of determinism. Now, if you ask me which of these three are my favorites, I would say Paul, only because it's more obvious, it's more in your face, whereas Eren's isn't. You could form a stronger argument against the idea that Eren's not truly being written as the Messiah. And as for Anakin, it's not handled in the cleanest way within the actual narrative for me. I want to make it known that although Isayama says his intent was to depict Eren in this way, he doesn't really do a good job of making it obvious that Eren had a choice. And that ultimately removes the layer of accountability of Eren's actions, and I know this contradicts Eren as being the Messiah of having choice. I just wanted to look at it from both angles. So what does it say about a Messiah with no choice? Someone being tied down by fate. I think it creates this paradoxical situation where the Messiah is something that embodies hope, and yet is being tied down by pure nihilism. I guess where it differs from the Messiah that has nihilistic traits but has choices, that the illusion of the savior with accountability is better than the savior with no accountability. Well, at least in my opinion. And that's because the casualties and sacrifice mean something. How a savior or messiah operates determines whether the ends justify the means. Why is it that every messiah will commit an atrocity? Why did Eren's path dictate tragedy? Was there a need for it? The goal ultimately dictated their approach. Their Jesus of the story has to achieve an impossible goal, and the only way to achieve it is by committing evil. And this reveals the level of humanity to them, because they aren't actually Jesus. They can't actually achieve their goal with purity, without casualties, because they aren't actually gods. Eren's rumbling is the most human evil atrocity ever. Who else but a human would have committed genocide trying to save people? And for people, well, they believe causes need messiahs. Is it true? I don't know. I would like to believe humanity doesn't need one person spearheading an idea or an ideal for others to rally behind and carry out actions towards their goal, but that might actually be the case. Paradis needed to follow Eren, whether to show them what not to become or to liberate them. How should I know? The whole thing was a mess. What I do know is that Eren was a very well-made portrayal of this trope.